In this After Effects tutorial, I will show you some of the techniques that Soulmate Visuals uses to animate these incredibly viral reels. Here I give you an example of what we are going to do. If you've ever wondered how these animations are made, and you want to learn one of the most in-demand creative skills these days, this course is for you. Here you'll learn step by step from a professional all the techniques you need to know to create these mega viral animations. This course is divided into 5 modules, in which you will learn everything from how to prepare your character in Blender and After Effects, to how to simulate the physics of different objects to achieve very realistic interactions. If you want to access this masterclass by Stan, creator of Soulmate Visuals, click on the link I've left in the description. One note: to create these animations and simulations, you must have the Newton plugin installed. This is a paid plugin, although there is also a free version, so you can try it out and have fun with the physics of all the objects, as if they were in the real world. By the way, if you want to support the channel, in addition to your likes, you can also do it from my Patreon page. There, I share with you all the projects I use in the tutorials, so you can keep practicing and learning. I leave the link in the description if you want to take a look. The first thing we'll do to create our character is go to the Mixamo website. Register, and that's it. We're in. Here, where it says Characters, we can choose the one we like best. We simply select it and click this option. There we have it. Look, there are so many. The one I used for this reel is called Brian. Now, in the Animations tab, we can choose the action we want the character to perform. To reset the camera view, we click this icon. By the way, if you like documentary-style editing, my course is now available. But it's not just a course in which I show you how to animate a sequence in After Effects and that's it. But I show you the entire procedure that I followed to create this animation. From the initial idea to the final render, going through each and every phase of the creative process. I'll leave the link in the description in case you want to take a look. We can also search for specific actions, for example, running. To play the animation in a loop, we enable this option. We can also adjust the timing and poses. We can make the character run slower or faster. To reset it to its original state, we click Reset. We can make the character run with their arms open or closed. And we can also change the style. It's actually quite fun. For the animation in this reel, I'm going to search for forward jump. And select this one. Once we've chosen the action and the character, we go to Download. Here, we select the FBX format, the frames per second, and it's important to select with skin. We click Download, wait a moment, and that's it. The next step is to open Blender. Select the light, the cube, and the camera. We right-click and delete everything. Now go to File, Import, and import our FBX model. Here we can see all the keyframes of this animation. I'll tell you about 3 keyboard shortcuts that will be very useful. With Alt pressed, we rotate around the character. With Alt and Shift, we can move the scene. And with Control and Alt, we zoom in or out. We can also do this with the scroll wheel. In this drop-down menu, we can activate the character's texture and add some lighting. These are some basic steps for rendering our animation. But if you want to learn more in depth and make your character perform multiple actions, Stan explains everything step by step in his course. I'm going to leave it with the default material. We create a camera and press the 0 key. But if we go to the beginning of the timeline and zoom in, we see that both the camera and the character move. So we need to lock the camera view. We come to this drop-down menu or press N. And here we check this option. We click on the green camera icon, and here we choose orthographic. This allows us to view the character as if it were a two-dimensional plane. If we move the camera along the axis while holding down the Alt key, we can position our character very precisely. We can set a top view, front view, side view, back view. I'm going to leave it in side view. Here we can zoom in or out. And now I'm going to position it correctly. Be careful not to have it too close to the top, because otherwise it will be cut off. It looks good here, but just
Lo
in
voy a
case,
alejar un poquito
I'll move
más.
it a little further away. Now we can go to the render options, scroll down to where it says Film, and enable transparency so that the background isn't visible. Here I'm going to choose 1920 by 1080 and 30 frames per second. Note that by default, it will render from frame 1 to 250. Let's select the skeleton to see the keyframes. The animation ends at frame 74, so I'm going to put 74 here as well. In this folder icon, we choose where we want to save the animation. Finally, we go to Render Animation, and wait for it to finish. This will generate 74 PNG images, which we will later use in After Effects. Here we are. We go to Import, File, and import this frame, which will serve as a reference. From this, we create a new composition. This will be called Animation, 2500 by 2500, 30 frames per second, and 20 seconds long. With a right-click, we create a solid that will serve as a reference to adapt our animation to a vertical format. Let's reduce the opacity, convert it to a guide layer, and lock it. We'll do the same with the reference image. Okay, now let's type the months of the year. We'll set the font size to 45, the line spacing to 60, and the letter spacing, kerning, to -10, so the letters are a bit closer together. We also need to center align the text. If you don't see this option, go to Window, Paragraph. Center the anchor point, and center the text layer within the composition. Now we'll adjust its position using our reference layer. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. With Ctrl+X, I'm going to cut the names from these last 3 months. Duplicate the text layer and paste them into this copy. By the way, the font I'm using is called San Francisco Pro in its bold variant. Now, from these text layers, we need to create shape layers. We'll delete the text layers and these shape layers we now have are what the Newton plugin will recognize. Let's create the chain. With the rectangle tool, we'll create a shape like this. We'll go to the options and disable the constraint to be able to modify the values separately. On the x-axis, we'll set the value to 200, and on the y-axis, 300. We'll also set the corner radius to 300. No fill, and for the stroke, we'll set the thickness to about 50 pixels. We'll change the color to differentiate it and duplicate it. For this copy, we'll set the x-axis value to 0, so we have a shape like this. We'll move it down a bit, and in the line join option for the stroke, we'll change it to round join, so the ends look rounded. Now with the layer selected, we'll use the ellipse tool and enable this option to create masks on the shape layer. We'll place it roughly here and create a mask like this. If we hold down the Control and Shift keys, we can make the mask perfectly round. That's good enough. We'll duplicate the mask, double-click it, and move it down. These two masks we created on the chain link are what the Newton plugin will recognize later, and based on these masks, it will create connection points. We'll set the masks to None, and now we'll position this layer correctly. Roughly here. Now we'll duplicate these two layers and move them down. This is how we'll create the chain. We want approximately the same space between this link and this one. That's good enough. We'll duplicate again and position it. If we hold down the Shift key, we can move everything precisely along the vertical axis. Although we can't see the composition here, we can use the layer handles as a guide, making sure we maintain roughly the same distance between each layer. We duplicate all the layers again and move them upwards. Remember to hold down the Shift key so they don't move sideways. Let's create a null object and position it on the first link. If we hold down the Control key, it will snap to that position precisely. Now, we're going to parent all the chain layers to this null object. We'll reduce the scale slightly and center it in the viewport. We'll expand the rotation property and set it to 90 degrees. Okay, now we'll use the reference layer to position it correctly. If necessary, we can continue adjusting the scale. With no layers selected, we create a circle like this. Remove the fill and set the stroke width to about 5 pixels. If we press the Control key, it will snap perfectly to this link of the chain. We position the layer correctly, rename it, and parent it to the null object. This is how we create this wrecking ball, which we'll use later to destroy the month names. If we want to break through this layer of shape, we have to place the ball on top of it so that these remain intact. We can do this by adjusting the scale or moving the null object slightly upwards. That looks good. We set the rotation back to 90 degrees, and if we want, we can delete the null object. Once our scene is ready, we can open the Newton plugin. Here it shows all the layers the plugin has recognized. These are all the layers we duplicated to create the chain. This one here is for the last 3 months of the year, and this one for the rest of the months. With this one selected, we'll click Separate to separate each letter individually. Here, the plugin tells us that it has detected a large number of polygons and that the simulation might run a bit slowly. It advises us to enable this option to improve performance. We are now in the plugin's interface. If we click play, we see that it runs too slowly. This is due to the warning we received earlier and is related to the number of polygons and masks the plugin has to process. As we can see, it has separated the letters for each of these months into individual layers. The last 3 months are on a separate layer. To differentiate them, we're going to change their color. If we click on this icon, we'll add a floor that all the layers will interact with. But this is still too slow, so let's do what we were told. We select all these layers, go to Advanced, and enable Use Convex Hull. This will significantly reduce the polygons and transform the month names into shapes like these. We do the same with these 3. We now have our first physics animation. All the elements are interacting with the floor. We can also enable the walls and ceiling to create a cube like this, so that no element goes outside, but that's not what we want, so we disable all these options. We select this layer, and in the General tab, we change it to Static. Now this layer doesn't move and interacts with all the others. If we change the magnitude to 2, for example, everything moves in slow motion, as if there were low gravity. And although it's a cool effect, it's not what we're looking for. So we'll set this value to 20. Here, we set it to 30, and in the collision tolerance, we set it to 10. Now the body dynamics look more realistic. We select all these layers, and we are going to change this option to static. Sorry, not to static, to dormant. Now they won't move until they interact with another element. This is starting to take shape, but we still need to make some adjustments. We select this first link and change it to static. And we also click on this Add Well Joint icon. If we play it, we can already see the chains swinging. All these red points are the masks we created earlier on the links, and the plugin recognizes them as connection points. Let's select this red point and the ball. Now we click Add Pivot Joint and enable the Enable Limit option. Well, and although the computer is starting to slow down a bit, this is already quite close to what we want. Now it's just a matter of refining the dynamics of this collision. If we select the entire chain and set the density to 0, we'll see that the collision will be very abrupt. By clicking on this point, we reset the parameter. I'm going to set the friction to 0 and the bounce as well. Here, I advise you to take your time and have some fun with the physics. Don't be afraid to adjust any parameter, and you'll see more clearly what each one does. If we set the density to 0 for the green layers, we'll see that they offer no resistance and the ball goes crazy. Although it doesn't look bad at all, right? Well, I'm going to leave this value as it was and maybe increase it a little. I'm going to set the friction to 0. Maybe a density of 2 will work well. I think I'll leave it like that. When you're happy with your result, we have to click the render button and wait a little. Here, this composition has been created called Simulation Animation 1. Let's preview it to see how it looks. Okay, it looks great. Let's organize our project a bit. I'm going to bring in this layer with the Soulmate Visuals brand colors. And I'm also going to import the character animation. Here, we can see the 74 frames we rendered. We select the first one and make sure the PNG sequence option is enabled. From this layer, we create a new composition and rename it. There, we can see our character jumping forward. If we want, we can add a fill effect with our favorite color. In this case, I'm going to leave it white. Right at this point, when the ball hits the month names, we're going to cut all these layers there. I select them again, and with the eyedropper, I'm going to color them with this color. Here, the computer might start to slow down a bit. Look how cool the effect looks and how the elements interact with each other. We select the ball layer, cut it at this point, and move it to the top. And we give the stroke the same color. We type in 75% and center the anchor point of this layer. Now, with the Control and Shift keys pressed, we link the pick whip to the ball layer, so it inherits all its position properties. We set the rotation to 90 degrees, and we also give it the same color. We might make it a little bigger. Now we need to cut it right at this point. Look how cool the effect is. We cut the layer containing the names of these 3 months and move it to the top. This one will be called October. We duplicate it and rename it. We expand Contents, and here we're going to delete all the letters of the word October. In this one, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to delete the layers for the months of November and December. Now, we have them separated. For this layer, we're also going to change the color, and we're going to add the deep glow effect. This is a paid plugin that lets you get some really good glows. We set the radius to 300 and the exposure to 0.35 or so. We can also enable chromatic aberration. Now, with the Alt key pressed, we're going to click on the exposure stopwatch, and we're going to type the following expression, wiggle, and in parentheses, 7, 0.2. This will give us a flicker effect that will look really cool. We're also going to add the deep glow effect to the ball with these settings. copy it, and paste it onto the text layer. Perfect. Let's continue. We select all these layers that contain the letters of the months and pre-compose them. We cut the composition right at this point. Change the color to differentiate it and add the same effect. We can copy this glow and paste it onto the composition. I'm going to bring in this other file with the reel I animated to use the audio as a reference. We create a composition called montage and leave the settings as they are. And here we're going to bring in simulation 1. To hide the chain at the top, we can move it on the y-axis, setting it to 925. We convert the composition to 3D. With a right-click, we create a 50mm camera and a node. Again, right-click, New, Null Object. We also convert it to 3D and parent the camera to it. At the beginning of the timeline, we're going to move on the x-axis. We can increase the scale a little so the ball isn't visible, but just a little. Here we set it to 125. Now, at 210, we move the camera to the right, setting Y to 465. We'll smooth out these two keyframes and leave them as they are. Now, I'm going to use the audio from this reel to guide the timing. Right here, at this peak, is when the ball hits, so let's move this composition to that point. To avoid a blank space at the beginning, we'll duplicate the composition. Right-click, go to time, freeze frame, and without moving the playhead, we'll cut this part. Here we type 2025, convert the layer to 3D, adjust the scale to 160, and at the last keyframe, center the anchor point and center it in the view. Now, move it down a bit, roughly like that. Now we can add our character to the scene. We convert it to 3D, change the color, and position it. The idea is for it to be above the text and looking towards the month of October. We go to the beginning of the timeline, duplicate the text, and place it below the character. I'm going to make these two text layers completely white. Okay, now, when the character falls onto the number 2, I want to create a bounce effect. So, with Control X, I'll cut the number 2, duplicate the text layer, and in this copy, I'll paste the number. We adjust the position of these two layers. Just when the character falls onto the number, we'll set a keyframe on the position. 3 or 4 keyframes later, we move it down, and 10 frames later, we copy and paste the first keyframe. We smooth out this last one with F9. Now, at this first keyframe, we cut the character's composition there, and we parent this part to the number 2. When the animation is finished, we cut the layer again and remove the parent link. At this last frame where the character is visible, we duplicate the composition. Right-click, go to time, freeze frame, extend it to the entire length of the composition, and cut it at this point. This way, the character will always stay on screen. Here, we can also type a phrase and add a small animation to it. Here in Animate, we add the opacity property. We set it to 0. We then create a keyframe for the offset and set its value to -100. A little later, we'll set this value to 100. In the advanced settings, we'll change it to ramp up, and now it's just a matter of adjusting the timing. If we want, we can change it from characters to words. We'll add a mask to this composition and animate it, so that when the phrase appears, it looks much better. If we want to highlight a word in this phrase, we can do it with a mask. We duplicate it with Ctrl-D and set this mask to subtract mode. I'm going to open this composition to copy the deep glow effect. And paste it onto this word. I'll also apply the same color. From this composition, we're going to create another one to add an effect. Right-click and create an adjustment layer, and add the noise effect. With a value of 5 or so, that's enough. We can also uncheck this option to make the noise black and white. Select the composition and double-click the ellipse tool to create a mask like this. Increase the feathering to 200, so the edges of the composition will look a little darker. As a final touch, we can add our brand name at the bottom of the composition. Change the font style for some contrast. Convert it to 3D, center the anchor point, and center it in the view. We have to move it down and darken the color quite a bit so it doesn't stand out too much. And with that, our animated reel is ready to share on social media. As I always say, if you get stuck at any step or have any questions, write me in the comments and I'll help you. And if you liked the tutorial, please give it a thumbs up so I know. See you in the next video.